Hey everyone, it's Mikki here. You're listening to Wikipedia. This week on the podcast, I speak to my friend Tina Haupert. She's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, health coach, and founder of Carrots and Cake. Tina and I talk all about her journey in the health space, what started as a personal blog, chronicling her journey to balance healthy living with real life, has grown into a platform and business that helps thousands of women optimise their health, especially those navigating the tricky terrain of hormones, metabolism, and midlife changes. So in this conversation, Tina opens up about her own health challenges, what led her to dig deeper into functional testing and root cause approaches, and how she helps women shift from chronic dieting to sustainable strength, energy, and confidence. And specifically, we do a deep dive into hair testing mineral analysis, which is super fascinating because I know people who really don't put much stake in things like hair mineral testing. So it was great to get insight from Tina, who uses this test regularly, to see what insights she gleans from it and how she helps her clients. Because at the end of the day, we're all about helping people the best way we can. So Tina and I also talk about nutrition myths, blood sugar balance, mindset reframes, and the power of data-driven coaching that doesn't forget the human behind the numbers. Really great conversation, guys. Tina is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, certified nutrition coach, and founder of Carrots and Cake. This is a really popular online platform and coaching business dedicated to helping women feel strong, balanced, and energized. With over a decade of experience in the wellness space, Tina blends functional testing, evidence-based nutrition, and mindset coaching to help women move from chronic dieting and burnout to sustainable health and vitality. She's passionate about making health approachable and personalized, meeting women where they are, and helping them understand their bodies better through data and compassion. So I've got a link as to where you can find Tina in the show notes, and that's you can find her blog, her resources. She's got 1 million of them, and also her podcast. Before we crack on into this interview, though, I would like to remind you that the best way to support Wikipedia is to hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast listening platform. That increases the visibility of Wikipedia in amongst literally thousands of other podcasts out there, so more people get the opportunity to learn from the guests that I have on the show, like Tina. All right, guys, enjoy the conversation. Tina, great to see you. Super excited, Tina, to chat to you about your health journey, because what I love is that you share so much on social, and I imagine you get a lot of questions about it as well. And then also, of course, talk to you a little bit about functional testing and particularly the hair tissue mineral analysis, which I've got a few questions about. But first of all, tell me about Carrots and Cake. Like, was it your health journey that sort of got you into beginning Carrots and Cake, or was it sort of the other way around? Talk to us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, maybe a little bit the other way around. So I started a blog in 2008. So I've been on the internet for almost or over 17 years, which is crazy. So I actually started the blog because I was engaged to be married, and I just wanted to shape up and look good for my wedding day. And, I had been kind of reading blogs at that point. So, I had a few that I followed, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to have my own blog. And so I started writing about what I was eating and recipes I was making and my workouts and the wedding planning. And I started to realize, people were really into my life and my lifestyle and the wedding and all of that. And I really grew a following. And I really did get up on like the upswing of blogs, you know what I mean? So yeah, I just grew a following from that. And did the blog thing for a long, long time. But in 2011, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And up until that point, I was, marketing myself as a healthy living blogger. And then I was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune disease. And it really stopped me dead in my tracks. I was like, what am I doing with my life? Am I actually healthy? Are some of my behaviors not that healthy? But that diagnosis really threw me for a loop for sure. And at that point, I really started chronicling that journey. And I mean, I went through hell and back. I mean, honestly, like I was really, really sick at times. And I went through the conventional medical system. And, there's nothing wrong with that. We need medications, we need surgery, we need doctors. There's amazing things that it does. But for me, being diagnosed at 31 years old, I was pretty young. I didn't want my future to be medications, and I didn't want it to be surgery for like losing my colon. And I just went through that system, just not getting answers and quote unquote failing medication. So I'd go from one medication, it would stop working, go to the next one, it would stop working. And it was kind of like this game of like medications and insurance and appointments. And I just was kind of miserable with that whole process. And I just knew there had to be a better way. And one of my readers was a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, an FDN, which is what I eventually became. But she reached out to me, and she was a new FDN practitioner, and she just wanted to get a little bit more practice. And she also had ulcerative colitis. So she reached out to me and she's like, hey, let's run a few labs on you. Let's see if we can get you a little bit more information about your disease, what's going on. And from that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. There's so much that I can do as far as my nutrition and my stress and my sleep and all the things that we talk about, that it just opened this whole world to me. And yeah, in 2019, I decided to become an FDN practitioner, graduated in 2020. And at that point, we had been doing a little bit of nutrition coaching. I started as a blogger and then transitioned to one-on-one macro coaching. We did the macros for a really long time, but it just made sense once I had access to those tests and I knew how to interpret them, that I had to offer them to our clients. It just got us such better results because we had data of ladies' bodies, much more than macros. And then, yeah, that was 2020. I found Jill, our business coach around there. And it's just, been building and creating and just growing this wonderful carrots and cake practice over here. So I guess that's the long, short story.
Yeah, amazing. And so, Tina, prior to your sort of reader reaching out, had you explored like paleo or autoimmune protocols and things like that? Those are things that immediately come to my mind when I'm thinking about functional nutrition.
Oh, yes. It was kind of the time of paleo where it like really blew up on the blogs and the podcasts and everything. And yeah, I went paleo for a very long time. I did the autoimmune paleo diet a bunch of times, but I never got better with the diets. And just knowing what I know about this disease, it's so much more than the diet. It really comes down to stress and the nervous system and your liver and your detox systems. And there's so much that goes into it. But yes, I was a big paleo person for a while there.
Yeah. And now how would you sort of characterize your diet? I'm just sort of interested.
Pretty much eat everything. I mean, I'm not a gluten person, but every once in a while I will dabble in gluten. And yeah, just do my best as far as whole foods, really nourishing foods. Big fan of minerals and like mineral-rich foods. But I would say like nothing's off limits. I always joke that the only thing I won't consume is Red Bull. It just kind of like grosses me out. Like, other than that, I will eat it. I'm really not a picky eater, but I think that also comes from more than a decade of restrictive diets. Because having ulcerative colitis, I just figured if I just removed all the food sensitivities, that would do it. That would heal me. That would heal my gut. I would remove the things that were causing issues. But I've learned over the years, it isn't about less. It isn't about restriction. It's actually your body needs more as far as minerals, amino acids from protein and things like that. So definitely different approach over here as far as like nourishment, protein, give me all the minerals, vitamins, nutrients, all of that. Because there was points where I was really sick that I was eating chicken breast and zucchini and maybe an avocado every once in a while. And like, my diet was so limited and my body was reacting to everything. And I just think I got so depleted from just removing foods. So.
Yeah, you mentioned like stress is a huge one, like, because have you always also been a bit of an athlete, Tina, like CrossFit style, into the gym? I think you and I joke about how many gym memberships you have. I mean, albeit I have 2, but I think you like Trump, I think you had like 4 at one stage, I can't recall. But like, has it always been part of your health journey, I guess, from the very beginning?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So I definitely think it's a personality thing, as far as the perfectionism, the overachieving, a little bit of type A.
Interesting.
And honestly, up until this point, even this year, I finally accepted that the high intensity exercise really was making some of my symptoms worse. And I was actually diagnosed when I was running marathons. And so obviously, a lot of like that endurance training can make things a little bit more leaky, I guess, as far as leaky gut, make symptoms worse. And yeah, I did marathons, half marathons, CrossFit, way too much CrossFit back in the day. And I still do CrossFit. I still run here and there, but yeah, it's a much more chill approach to exercise. Cause yeah, I was that more is better. Harder is better. And for somebody like me who has nervous system issues and autoimmune, issues, it just wasn't the best. So live and learn. It took me a long time to change.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I guess things like that are almost always going to be a work on, right? Because if you're a personality type which is sort of drawn to the highs and lows of training, and the highs of training, I suppose, then I can imagine. I think I read a post of yours saying, yeah, I thought I was doing, you were sort of mentioning that you thought you were taking it easy, but actually you weren't taking it easy for what your coach or who are you working with?
His name's Curtis, and he's in Canada, and he's with the Gut Solution.
Oh,
They're in
interesting.
too, and they specifically focus on IBD, but he is more their parasite, immune system, mold specialist. And I have kind of a history of mold and all that, so working through all that. He's great. He's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is it about the link between your nervous system and your ulcerative colitis? Is it, like, has that always been, is it a personality thing, Tina? Like just that you're like revved up, or is it actually just integral to anyone that's got UC issues?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I think come into play. Like we did some genetic testing actually, and yes, I'm a little bit more susceptible to having more nervous system responses to things. And also my childhood. I don't talk about my childhood too much, but childhood ACEs as far as what is it, adverse childhood experiences. Yeah. So like I didn't have a good upbringing. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was a single mom. There was a lot of food scarcity and, it just wasn't great. So I think a lot of it does stem from my childhood. Like we moved around a lot. There wasn't a lot of stability and safety and things like that. So I think even from the get-go, I think my nervous system is a little bit higher. And then, add in some of the type A perfectionism, people pleasing, operating at 110% every single day. It's been a lot. It's been a lot. I mean, even with like talk therapy, sorry, I'm getting on like tangents here. I
No,
just
good.
remember first starting to work with my therapist. And one of the first tasks she gave me was sitting on the couch for 5 minutes and not doing anything. So she was like, no scrolling your phone, no watching TV, no folding laundry. I want you just to sit there and relax and just take in your surroundings. And it was so hard for me to sit still for 5 minutes. So I've come a really long way, but I think that's how amped up my nervous system is. And then, yes, with the nervous system, it's like anything that's going on in my gut, essentially my nervous system's like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst thing ever. And then, of course, like the symptoms and things like that. So I think there's a lot that comes into play with that, but I'm working on it, setting boundaries around work, relaxing, not working all the time, taking it down
Yeah.
and not exercise, it's never one thing.
Nice. And I imagine that your ability to tolerate foods and other things is so much better when you've got your nervous system sort of in check.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we talk to our clients about this all the time where, they have constant bloating after meals. And then we start talking about, well, what's your environment like when you're eating? Are you eating in the car? Are you eating walking out the door? Are you chewing your food? Are you breathing? Are you taking breaks between bites? But it kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, if your nervous system's a little amped up, it's going to make digestion, not optimal. But yeah, doing a lot better, knock on wood. I mean, I used to have the gas, the bloating, the cramping, the diarrhea, the blood, the mucus, like all of that. And yeah, knock on wood, doing so much better. And I've been off meds for 4 months, knock on wood. So a lot of progress.
That is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Tina, it's interesting listening to you talk about like the nervous system and how that impacts on your digestion, but also, I mean, you must work with a number of clients. As you say, you talk to your clients and you can probably pretty obviously see that underlying their nutrition or their, I guess, their training issues is to do with the nervous system, to do with stress. And I don't know about you, but I find it so hard to have those conversations with people. And maybe it's because they think that they're coming to me, for diet, but then we start having these other conversations and they can't quite see the link. Like, do you think people are better now at seeing the link than what they may have been, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago? It feels like it's more emerging that there's something there, but I'm not sure. Like, have you got any thoughts on that and how your clients sort of deal with you chatting to them about it?
Yeah, I think just what you said, it's emerging. I think we're starting to pay attention to it more, but I still think it's one of those things that we overlook. I mean, I'm the perfect example. It took me over a decade to really have it like click. You need to manage your stress and be kinder to your nervous system and get yourself out of that like fight or flight. But I think for a lot of ladies who are, high achieving, type A, there's a lot of benefits of acting this way as far as, achievement and checking things off your to-do list and feeling a certain way about your accomplishments. And yeah, I think a lot of our clients are working moms. They're managing the house, they are going to the gym, they're doing all the things. So there is like that feeling of accomplishment, like acting this way or behaving this way. And I also think it's really hard to make changes in this department as far as like managing stress, because we've always been told more is better. And like to think you should sit on the couch and not fold the laundry or not listen to the podcast to expand your knowledge in this, XYZ topic. So I think like the stress piece is really hard. And if you think about like the nutrition or fitness piece, that's so much quote unquote easier, and I think that people are coming to us for that. But of course, like when you get that stress piece under control, I think you're able to handle the nutrition and the fitness better. But yeah, that's like a really hard conversation to have because everyone's like, I'm not that stressed. But I think a lot of us have gotten used to operating at 110% every single day.
You were so right. This is like, it's an area that they've thrived in, and they've almost had to be that way to be as successful. And I often think that, if I ask someone if they're stressed, like you can almost immediately sort of see it in their body language, even over Zoom, just how they sort of hold themselves and how they breathe as to what, their body is telling me, but what they tell me may be quite different. So sometimes it's better if you had the opportunity to ask someone who's close to them. So, is Tina feeling that stressed right now? You're probably going to get a much more, I don't know, I guess, honest answer or a reflection of the truth.
I'm writing that down.
So, Tina, what I know about you and the content you share, and just from talking to you, is your how much the functional testing has really like helps your clients. Which functional tests helped you first, and then did that give you the buy-in you needed to then explore this further, I guess?
Yeah, so I think that the functional testing was really eye-opening because it really did validate a lot of the symptoms and feelings that I had, because my doctor would run the traditional blood work and, everything would come back in the normal range. But then I just did not feel great. And I mean, especially with my eye condition, like I was going to the bathroom multiple times a day. I was seeing blood in the toilet. Like it was really bad at times. And a lot of my blood work was totally normal. So it was like really frustrating. Obviously, there were some markers that were off, but I would just get like non-answers or, just like no action items as far as what I could do to improve the blood work that was out of whack. So with the functional testing, I just got different data. So I think the HTMA, the hair tissue mineral analysis, was probably one of the most helpful in the sense that it really called me out on my stress levels. And that's the thing about our bodies. We lose minerals and electrolytes when we are stressed out. So, running marathons and, endurance training, like if you ever ran an event and you're like, your skin almost gets like salty, like after it, when you're sweating so much. like that's an extreme example of like losing sodium from the body, but you lose magnesium, you lose potassium. So obviously like a physical event, you'll lose important minerals and electrolytes, but also just everyday stressors, chronic stress. All of us were always kind of like stressed out. So our bodies end up being like really depleted from minerals. And then you add in the exercise, the sweating, like all of that. I think just a lot of ladies are like really depleted. But for me specifically, all of the high endurance or the endurance training, the CrossFit. I have a almost 11-year-old son. Pregnancy, breastfeeding will leave you pretty depleted. I mean, you're growing a baby, you're birthing that baby, you're feeding that baby. It's like a lot of resources that the mom is losing, and then just chronic stress. You know what I mean? So that test was really helpful. And on the first one, there's a pattern called the 4 lows pattern. So your 4 minerals are all below the reference range. And those are calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and they make up, 80 to 90% of the minerals in our body. So right off the bat, I saw this test and it was just, your minerals are flatlined. This is why you have no energy. This is why you're falling out. This is why you can't build muscle. Like you just don't have the energy as far as resources go to feel your best. So that was really helpful. And then also the test is helpful just to tell you what your body needs nutritionally to thrive. Instead of guessing or doing what everybody else is doing on the internet or buying greens powders from influencers, I had a test that said, hey, your body is really deficient in potassium. You need to start consuming more coconut water and eating avocados and more bananas and and I just think it was a more personalized approach to my nutrition. And it felt like I had some control over like what I should be eating instead of just restricting. And I started to feel better. I mean, that was the thing. Like I just had more energy. I was in a better mood. And then I think from there, things started to just get better and better because I wasn't so depleted. I wasn't so exhausted all the time. So, it starts with food and nutrition a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because I've got friends and and they're very science based, and they call out a lot of functional tests. Like they don't buy into the hair tissue mineral analysis. They don't buy into the Dutch test. They don't buy into a lot of these tests, which I haven't used the hair test before, although, and I've got to say that getting to know you and your work over the last 3 or 4 years has really it's really intrigued me as to how helpful it might be. Whereas prior to that, I'm like, well, there's not a lot of literature on it, and what does it tell me? Albeit it's interesting because I don't have that same analysis on the Dutch test, which I have used a lot in my clinic, and it's been super helpful. Like, why is there this mismatch between what we see in the literature, for example, with the hair mineral tissue test versus what you see practically and what I know that in the success I know you have with your clients?
Yeah, no, we get that question. And I always say it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. So blood work, I think, is kind of like gold standard for, I don't know, checking mineral levels and all that. But what you're seeing in the blood is like a snapshot in time. And for some minerals, it's only a tiny percentage of what is actually in your tissues and cells. So for like potassium, only 2% is in your blood, but then 98% is in your tissues. And your hair is essentially a dead tissue. So it's a good way to get more of a record of your mineral status versus like a snapshot in the blood. And we always say like, the hair is almost like the rings on a tree. It like kind of tells a story, and your hair grows at a rate of every like an inch for every 3 to 4 months. So when you're sending in your sample, it's actually looking at the last 3 or 4 months of your life. And it can kind of give us an idea of what you need to do nutritionally. And yeah, I just don't think, it's a standardized test for like conventional doctors. Maybe they're just not trained in it, or maybe they don't know. But just kind of what you were saying, like working with clients and really leaning into the nutrition and the minerals, like our clients, they just feel better. We have clients coming off thyroid medications, which we tell them to do. We would never advise that. It's not our place to do that, but they just do. They feel so much better, So I don't know. I just think about electrolyte. If you were to collapse at the end of a marathon, somebody would come over and give you like an electrolyte powder or a goo or a gel or, something like good with electrolytes. So I think just simply getting enough of the right things, you're going to feel so much better. So I'm not sure if it answered your question specifically, but
No, it totally did.
The validity of the test.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you, Tina, in that, when as practitioners, we look at, my sort of framework for looking at research and evidence base, I suppose. Yes, there's some of it that comes from science and literature, but even the gold standard of science, and it's just a good reminder for people, those randomized controlled trials, everything is controlled. Absolutely everything, apart from the one thing that they're interested in understanding mechanistically what's going on. And that's just not how we live real life. So, but yes, that's really, it's really informative. And then of course I like to think about it through an evolutionary lens, like, what have we been designed to be able to sort of evolve from. Like, I'm not suggesting we all need to go back to caves and wear loincloths, but you can learn a lot from how we've evolved over time. But then of course, clinical practice, like the evidence that you have, and that really the only evidence people really need is, well, how do they feel when they have that data in front of them? They make changes that change the outcomes of how they feel, but also it's very visible. You can see it in a retest situation.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see people. So we use something called a symptom scorecard, because I'm with you. Like, I love a good test data, but if you're feeling better and your symptoms change, I'm like, yeah, it's quote unquote working. But yeah, we do something called the symptom scorecard, and it's probably a good 10 pages long, but it asks you about every symptom under the sun related to your blood sugar, your gut, your energy, your menstrual cycles, like all of that. But they fill that out when they first take the test. And then, depends on the program, but 3 to 6 months later, they'll fill out that symptom scorecard again after they've already done the mineral test. And a lot of times their symptoms are cut in half or more, just based on they've made with their diet and their stress management, because that's an important part of it too. But it's just incredible. It's just, you see these awesome changes in people.
And are you with me in that, like, you can't really get everything, or even if people think they're quote unquote eating healthy, they're getting in their protein and they might be having a salad at lunch and maybe vegetables at dinner, you can still run shy on a lot of the minerals and the vitamins and the micronutrients that we need, just because the diet isn't really set up to provide it all.
Yeah, I agree. And, we like supplements over here. So, sometimes we're supplementing magnesium, or we've been into iodine lately as far as like iodine deficiency and stuff. But yeah, sometimes we'll add some supplements in for our ladies. And yeah, just emphasizing just getting a variety of foods. I know a lot of people like kind of eating the same thing, but we're always encouraging ladies to just, seek out more variety as far as like the mineral rich foods go and everything. But yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to cover all your bases, but it's nice, when you have a test like this, to really see where you need to up the potassium. Like, everybody needs more potassium.
So, Tina, I'm interested to understand more about the patterns, because I think the way that you talk about it is super insightful on social media, and you just mentioned it earlier. So when you look at a hair mineral tissue analysis, are you looking for, do you often see patterns of low minerals that then align with some of the symptoms that you see, or is it a pattern of super low in one, fine on the others? Like, or is it a bit of both, depending on the individual?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the individual for sure, and kind of where they are in their health journey. So like that 4 lows pattern that I saw on my first test, we'll see that for women who just had a baby or a couple babies or who have gone through a really stressful time in their life. We might also see it if they have gut issues, because, if you have the most perfect diet, eating all the mineral and nutrient rich foods, but then your gut is not ideal and you're not absorbing things properly, it can show up in that pattern too. So with that pattern, a lot of times that person or that client probably needs more food, more nutrition, more minerals. So yeah, like under eating would go into that category. And then they need rest. They need to just lay off the exercise potentially, set some boundaries with work, but really spending time like nourishing and resting their body, which is hard for some of our ladies to hear. But that's one that we see again and again. And I feel like that really is giving us info that that person is kind of in that exhaustive stage of stress, almost like that burnout stage of stress. And a lot of times it does go hand in hand with how they feel, just like exhausted, trouble getting out of bed every day, low motivation, hair falling out, things like that, that just scream like too much. The body just needs a break and just needs to rest and get some good quality food in them.
Yeah, and then I wonder how many women you see sort of come to you super interested in things like hormone replacement therapy, which I'm a fan of for a lot of people for sure. And even like I certainly think that there's a lot you can do with diet, but if you can get on something which helps you stabilize things to then work on your diet, that's great. But I do also think about that in the context of pregnancy, for example, like postnatal depletion, like being super deplete in minerals. I often think that women of our age, with everything going on, that a lot of their symptoms I think are hormone related. Well, they are, but that's not actually driving it. It's actually these low minerals in this just nutrient deplete state.
Yep, 100%. And yeah, something we say in the mineral world, the minerals drive the enzymes that drive the hormones. So a lot of time, if there is a lot of hormonal imbalance, we can backtrack it to the minerals. But if you think about it, if you're low in minerals and like really depleted, like, there's no real, I guess, motivation to have high sex hormones as far as like production goes and things like that. And I'm with you. I'm not against HRT. I think it can be amazing for women and really, really help them. And obviously there's research now coming out as far as like the benefits and starting it sooner than later and all of that. But I also think those hormones will work better if you have your nutrition and your minerals and your lifestyle and stress under control. It's just going to work so much better because, there's many ladies out there that go on the HRT and they're like, it didn't work or it didn't work as well as it did. And then I always think about like, what else is going on? So that's, I think, where we come in. It's like, how do we actually optimize, so you feel your best if you decide to go the hormone route.
Yeah, nice one. And then with something like the HMTA, like how long does it take to see a change in these numbers? And I've seen you report on social, like I've seen you do sort of befores and afters with people's tests. And I mean, you mentioned the 3 to 4 months is how long it takes for our hair to grow. Is that what we should expect in order to see a change in the test? Or will it actually take a lot more time? Like what's the
Yeah, so
goal?
I've heard ladies like 2 or 3 weeks saying that they feel better, just simply adding more electrolytes and just really leaning into the nutrition. So you can feel better like pretty quickly, and I think that's why we like the minerals so much. But I think to actually see like your test results change, we usually say like 4 to 6 months. You can test as soon as 3 to 4 months. Just as your hair grows, you could do another test. But I like to see like a little bit longer between tests, just so you can see how much change there is. And then of course with any health journey, it doesn't just end, you know what I mean? So once you do that retest, like now you have new things to work on. And that's the thing, the minerals will change and the ratios will improve in theory. But again, I just like the test because it's so easy. Like we send you a kit right to your house, you cut a little bit of your hair. And I always tell ladies if they have longer hair, just cut it from the back, you'll never miss it. Send it off to the lab. And then, we get the results, a couple weeks later. So just like such a easy test.
Are there any limitations, Tina, that you see in practice with the hair mineral test that you need to navigate?
As far as like the testing goes or like the results?
Yeah, the testing or does I imagine you're consistent with the lab that you send it to. Like are those the things that people need to be mindful of, I suppose, if they're looking at the hair tissue mineral analysis, like the lab it's going to, I don't know, time in transit, does that even matter? Like, does the hair change once you cut it? Like, I don't know, like are these things you need to think about?
Yeah. So if you dye your hair, and of course we work with a lot of women. So if you do dye your hair, cover up the grays or whatever, you have to wait 6 to 8 weeks for it to grow out because you really need that like natural hair. But the example I always give, like I'll do like the front and the sides. I don't get too many grays, but my hairdresser, she's my friend, my girlfriend, she doesn't really dye the back. So like the stuff back here is more like natural. So yeah, you just have to get like the natural hair. And then of course, swimming in pools like chlorine or salt water. We had a male client recently, his barber cut his hair, but he sprayed some sort of like salt solution on his hair, something like that. But it really skewed his results because we got his results back and his sodium was like sky high. So of course we emailed him about it and he's like, oh yeah, I forgot my barber sprayed this stuff on my hair. So we had to send him a new one. But yeah, there's like little things like that can kind of skew the results. But we have instructions as far as like how to get an accurate sample as far as like hair being in its most natural form.
I find it interesting what you say about potassium. So, because I've also seen what you think about the electrolyte supplements. Like you don't hold back there, which is totally fine. Like I'm a big fan, but I think you've seen, I love the Element and all the other ones that have now popped up because of it. What don't you love about them?
I mean, I'm not a total hater. It's just sometimes I think we see things on Instagram and we think like, oh, we should do this. But then, you use the supplement and it either doesn't do anything or it makes you feel worse. So that's why I like the testing. And then from the testing, make a recommendation there. So I like the ones from Paleo Valley. They have, good whole food ingredients and they taste really good. We also recommend the pickleball one. It has like a good mix of different electrolytes in there. It just kind of depends. Like I think if you like it and it works for you, go for it. But I think a lot of people are just buying magical solutions and not really realizing what their body needs. And most of the electrolyte supplements, they don't have a lot of potassium. There's all these like FDA rules in the United States as far as like how much potassium you can have in a supplement. And our needs are really high. I mean, I've heard 4,000, 5,000 milligrams a day. And most have like, I don't even know, 200 milligrams. So like whatever electrolyte supplement you have, powder or whatever, you're always going to need more potassium. So a lot of times, I actually did it today, put a scoop in here of my electrolytes, and then I put, a bunch of coconut water mixed with my water in there. So just to cover your bases as far as what you need. But yeah, I don't hate them all. It's just kind of like, I think a lot of people are just thinking like, ooh, magical solution. And I'm like, well, is this exactly what you need?
Oh no, totally. It's a little bit like, and to be fair, I mean, not that I need to defend myself, but I run a lot. I lose a lot of salt.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But equally though, I do see a lot of supplements which are absolutely targeted towards women of our age, like Happy Mammoth. I don't know if you've seen Happy Mammoth and these hormone supplements which are supposed to, their advertising, Tina, is like melt fat away. And like, I don't even know how they get away with that, but people are just, I guess they're really speaking to a bit of the desperation that some women feel this time of life because of all of the things that we've just been discussing. And so if they think they're going to get it by, paying $120 a month because it's an easy solution, then I can see why people get sort of like caught in there.
Oh, totally. Totally. I mean, the other day I had a client come to me and she was asking me questions about a woman's creatine. And I was like, what makes it special for women? I had to like go and see what was in there, and it was pink and like all of that. But yeah, I just like the marketing and messaging. And I don't know, I guess we're trying to make things as simple as possible. I do think a lot of our ladies, they're just so overwhelmed and they just feel like hopeless and helpless and kind of lost in this whole health journey. So I'm just like, let's just make it as simple as possible. And we literally have like a food list, and it's like food support for minerals. I think that's what we call it. But we just list foods that are high in the minerals, just so, if you want to do an electrolyte powder, go for it. But also, you can get minerals from food too, and you have to eat. So, we're just always encouraging people to buy more, good quality, like whole foods, like potatoes. They're great with potassium.
They are great with potassium. How much potassium does ketchup have? Tina, do you know?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to check. I mean, probably a teeny bit, right?
Yeah, surely it's good. And can people improve their mineral status from food alone? Like, because I know there will be people who really don't love the idea, like it doesn't matter what it is, but they just don't really love the idea of supplements. But do you see significant improvement when people make these diet changes?
Yeah, for sure. I think food is probably our number one, because I do think you can get really good results. As I always say, like you have to eat, you have to go to the grocery store. So let's foods that your body needs. But yeah, sometimes we do add in some supplements. We're not crazy supplementers. Like we might give somebody 3 to 5 supplements, depending on what's going on with them, because there are certain patterns that we see that, yes, a supplement is going to help get you there faster. But we also have clients that they're like, I don't want to spend money on supplements, or I don't have extra money to spend on supplements. It just kind of depends. They can add up. But the thing about minerals is stress will really deplete them. So of course, if you're not managing your stress, you're not setting boundaries around work, if you're not laying off on the exercise, if you're not sleeping, all of those things are going to prevent you from improving your health as far as like the mineral status goes. So, as much as it's food, it's also, the stress management too.
Yeah. Do you get vegetarians coming to you, Tina?
Yeah, vegetarians, vegans, and yeah, we love them. They just have to work a little bit harder with their nutrition, but yeah.
And do you often see that their mineral status is a bit lower just because they're not getting the animal protein in, or you haven't? What kind of other patterns do you see?
Yeah, kind of depends. Depends on the person because we have worked with vegetarians and they do a great job with the protein and a variety of fruits and veggies and all that. It just kind of depends because I'm sure you've worked with clients like this too. You can be a vegetarian or vegan and eat, bagels and like Quest bars, like, you know what I mean? Just like not the highest quality nutrition. So it kind of just depends on the client. But we have worked with vegetarians and vegans who really have embraced changes. So again, I think it just kind of goes back to like the client and kind of where they are in the journey. But I do think they just have to work a little bit harder as far as like meeting like all the nutritional needs that they have.
Yeah. And what about this? I just keep firing questions at you as I'm thinking about them, but I really love the organ supplements, like the organ meat supplements and things like that. First Light is a company it's a New Zealand based company, but it's also based in the US, and they do those organ meat supplements. Like, is this a supplement you might recommend to some of your clients?
Yeah. There's a couple. There's one from Smidge that they do a beef liver. And then Paleo Valley has like an organ complex. But yeah, that could be something like a Four Lows person might need because, those organs, they have the iron, the zinc, the copper, the vitamin A, retinol. They have everything in there. So it could be like a good place to start for some of those people. But yeah, we'll recommend them quite a bit because I've tried to eat liver. I've tried wrapping it in bacon. I've done all sorts of things and I can't eat it. Just can't.
Do you not like pate, Tina?
I mean, actually, I would eat a pate. I don't mind that too much. But we've got like the chicken livers from like the grocery store. Have you seen those? Yeah. And we tried to grind them up and put them in burgers, which was okay. And then we tried wrapping them in bacon. I was like, well, if it's in bacon, it's gonna taste good. I just couldn't.
But no, no. Yeah, we've put it in ground beef before, and in fact, there was a company here in New Zealand which sent me mince with livers added, so I didn't have to sort of like think about it. And I know you can get that done at your butcher as well. And there was a distinct organ meat flavor which wasn't unpalatable. It was just different, right? And in fact, when I do have organ meats, and a friend of mine is like this as well, like it's almost like this superfood. I just get this like, I feel amazing after it, like even like 50 grams of it, which really reminds me that it can for some people be such a bit of a superfood.
I know I should revisit it again. We actually had a client who would freeze it and just like cut it up and then freeze it and then just kind of like down the frozen piece. And she said it didn't have like a strong flavor. And I was like, one, that's genius. And then I was going to try it myself and then I never did. So maybe I should.
Do you remember? Yeah. What about who was it? Liz Wolfe from Balanced Bites. I'm pretty sure she used to do frozen liver and put it in a smoothie or something, which always sort of like made me feel just a little bit. I wasn't quite sure about that, but the frozen piece I think is something which could be a real workaround for some people. Tina, outside of HTMA, do you use the Dutch test, or what other functional tests do you do in clinic that you found have been super informative for your clientele?
Yeah, so we do the Dutch. We like that one. We work with ladies in perimenopause and menopause. So it can be really helpful as far as just seeing what's going on with hormones. And then the cortisol part of the test, I think, is really telling for ladies, especially, sometimes seeing that flat line of cortisol is always really telling as far as like what's going on. And then the GI map, which is a stool test that looks at the gut and digestion and all of that. So we run those three. And then depending on the client, we might run another test depending on what they need. So we've done the OAT. We've done food sensitivities tests like the MRT, iodine loading tests, mold tests, as far as like the mode. So it kind of just depends what the client needs. But with our program, you get those three tests right off the bat. And I think those three together, you really get some good correlations as far as like where to go, as far as like next steps.
I imagine, because if you've got the stool test, which shows you that you're not absorbing anything, and then you've got the low minerals in your hair, like is that the kind of correlations that you see sometimes with people?
Yep, exactly. And even things like estrogen issues, like estrogen dominance and stuff, you can actually look at the gut to see if like those estrogens are being detoxed through the gut. So there's like really cool correlations there, and like the leaky gut, or if you have like a sensitivity to gluten, that might be causing more inflammation in the gut. That would show up in the minerals. The four lows pattern with low cortisol. So that's a lot of like interesting patterns that you can make. And then we will use blood work here and there. But again, it just kind of depends on the client and what they need.
Yeah. Yeah, I use blood work for for a few things, but of course there are so many. To your point about electrolytes, it doesn't tell you anything really about electrolytes in the body because they're so tightly regulated. And then there are just some things like B12, which a low B12 will tell you something, but a high B12 doesn't tell you that you can use B12 or anything like that, which is some of these functional testing will give you much more of a guide as to what you're metabolizing and what you're using and excreting and things like that.
Yep, 100%. And with the HTMA, sometimes with that B12 that's high on the blood work, we'll see low lithium, lithium oronate, and sometimes supplementing that can make that B12 absorption, better. So just like little like clinical pearls like that, we can just like help as far as the minerals go. But yeah, there's some just like interesting correlate those three tests and symptoms and all that.
Nice. Have you used CGM, Tina, either personally or with your clients?
Yes, personally. And then I talked to you when I last saw you about it. And it's funny because probably like 2 weeks after I saw you, one of our clients told us about the Lingo, which you can get on Amazon for $49. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot more affordable than the one I was recommending that was like over $200. So we've been recommending that to all of our clients. They are so into it. They're loving it. They're loving the data. And yeah, with this next Fit and Fueled group, we are going to be devoting some time to CGMs because I think they are so helpful, like so helpful. So yeah, really excited. And yeah, thank you for getting me on that again because I was like, yes, this is a great tool.
Yeah, I was just chatting to a client about it just before we jumped on a call. It's just such a good behavior change tool for the person. Like if you can see how that food is affecting you, but also how your stress is affecting you, like it's going to really that's like real time data that is really difficult to then to ignore because you can't it's sort of like knowledge is power, but it's also a bit of a pain in the ass because then sort of on you to change it, which is what I love about the CGM. And I don't know, I know that there are some really big voices out there, particularly in the nutrition space, who are super against them for anyone who doesn't have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, which I feel is really short-sighted, actually, given their potential to help improve, the people who might not be at that stage of a chronic illness, but is certainly making their way there.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I love it. Now that we have our clients on them, they're sending me their screenshots like all the time, just showing me the differences. And it's just like the littlest thing. So, I had one client where she was having smoothies for breakfast and things like that. And she would see her blood sugar shoot up and then she'd be hungry a little while later. And she started to have more of like high protein, high fat, high fiber breakfast. And she was sending me her like before and after screenshots. And she's like, I feel so much better. I didn't have an energy crash. I wasn't hungry till lunch. So just, that tool helped her make that change because, you can tell people these things all day. We all know that we need a high protein breakfast, but if you've been drinking a smoothie for 5 years, it's like hard to get out of that habit. But I think like seeing that kind of, gives you almost like an aha moment that like, oh my gosh, my body is responding different. And then that of course encourages that behavior change. But yeah, our clients are like super into it right now. I get screenshots like every day.
And how long is Fit and Fuel, Tina? Like when you work, because it's quite an intensive process, isn't it? Because you do the functional testing and then you're working with these ladies over how many months?
6 months. So yeah, it's a long time together. That's why I would say to them, I'm like, you got to be committed because we're going to be spending a lot of time together. And so weekly calls, active community. Yeah, we cover all the bases as far as metabolism goes.
Yeah, nice. And as I understand it, they come into Fit and Fueled. It's not about weight loss per se to start with. Am I right about that? It's not actually a weight loss program, isn't it?
No, it's not. And it's always like a hard sell because everybody wants the weight loss program. Like that's the exciting stuff. But yeah, we really focus on getting your metabolism responsive again and just your health, like your overall health. I think a lot of ladies come to us with, insulin resistance, blood sugar issues, thyroid issues, hormone issues, adrenal issues, like all the things related to various types of stress. So for a lot of them, it's really kind of bringing their body back into balance. And then, when they have figured out how to maintain their weight and they've really developed these amazing habits as far as their protein and, high quality foods and breakfast and minerals and, all the things that we talk about, then they can go into a responsible fat loss phase. And that's, what I teach because, it's not about crash dieting. It's not about, starving yourself for 8 weeks to gain the weight back right after you go back to eating normal. So I really try to give them like a strategic forever approach to body composition change. So, but yeah, I like to call it like a metabolism transformation program, which
Oh, I
again,
love it.
sometimes a hard sell when people want to lose weight.
No, totally. But also, I imagine that many of your clients will be women who have done the crash dieting, they've done the restriction, they've done the over exercise, and they've accumulated several $1,000s worth of things which have really gone against their health. And I don't know about, I mean, you must get this as well, Tina, but a lot of the people that I see now are like, sure, I'd like to lose a few kilos, but actually I just want to feel better.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I think you get to your 40s too, and you're just like, I'm done with the yo-yo dieting. I just want to feel good and happy and balanced and not snap at my husband for no reason. So I always say the goal is to feel better and then to look better. Because if you don't feel well or your body is super stressed, it's not going to be easy for you to lose weight. So obviously, feeling better is the goal. And then in theory, the weight loss will come because it will be easier because your body's more balanced, you're more sensitive to insulin, your thyroid's happy, and then you have the habits to support that. So you're able to lose the weight and then maintain the weight. So that's really what we're trying to do. And, that's why it's a longer program. Like I wish I could work with these ladies for a year, but months is still a long time.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And Tina, does the HTMA tell us anything about, what does it tell us about thyroid?
Oh, so there's a thyroid ratio. So the test does tell you about the levels of minerals that show up in your hair, but then the ratios of those. And so with the thyroid, it's actually the calcium potassium ratio. And the reason why we all need more potassium, I mean, one, because we just don't consume enough, but it can make the cell more sensitive to thyroid hormone. So you have the thyroid hormone, floating around in your blood and yada, yada. That's what we measure on a blood test, but it actually needs to get into the cells. But if there's not enough potassium to get in there and there's too much calcium, your thyroid meds, your thyroid is just not going to work as well. So it can just give us an idea what's going on. So sometimes I think the optimal is 4.2, but we'll see people in the hundreds as far as that thyroid ratio goes. So it's not a diagnostic test. It's not saying, oh, you have hypothyroidism, you have Hashimoto's. It can't diagnose you. Like you would definitely need a blood test to really like confirm. But it's going to give you some good clues as far as like what to do, where to look next. Same with blood sugar, same with adrenals. So yeah, it's helpful for just, do we need to, do a little bit more digging here?
Yeah, nice. And I guess, if you've got, when you mention about the high calcium to low potassium, it's not saying that people need to restrict calcium, but it's just about you need the substrates to regulate, to get these things to where they're required in the body.
Yeah. You just need like a better balance of those. And sometimes the calcium, well, so what's happening when you see high calcium, it's leaving the bones and the teeth and it's ending up in the hair. And obviously we don't want that to happen. So that's where some supplementation would be helpful as far as like K2 and things like that, magnesium, to make sure the calcium staying where it needs to stay. But that can make the cell less sensitive to that thyroid. So yeah, it's just really interesting. It's just like such a cool test because, we'll see people in the hundreds and they're like, oh, I have, hypothyroidism. And we're like, oh yeah, that's what we're seeing on the test,
Yeah, that would be super validating actually. And do you get that same correlation between that HTMA and say the Dutch test with what you see with cortisol and things like that? Is that like super, like the 4 lows on the HTMA and then that cortisol dysregulation? Is that a common pattern? for both?
Yeah. Sometimes we'll see that for sure, where like the cortisol is mismatched, and then we'll see like low cortisol with like the 4 lows, things like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of like really cool correlations on the test. But I think that's why it's like helpful to do 3, because I think if you just do 1, it just leaves you with more answers, especially like running the Dutch by itself. I'm always kind of like, well, like, why are the hormones doing this? So it's just nice to have all 3.
Yeah, no, totally. And you've got such success with your patients, well, not patients, clients, Tina, using these functional tests. This is why I feel it is short-sighted that we just dismiss them out of hand, like if you see these results that would be pretty difficult just to determine with no tests, like, yes, you can plug in what someone eats, because the alternative is, of course, you just get someone to go into Chronometer and write down everything they eat and be super rigorous with it, which is a fine snapshot for maybe a day to even a week, but you're relying on that self-report data, and it's not really giving you that history that you're then going to get with the testing.
Yeah. Agree for sure. Yeah.
Nice one. Okay, I've got like 2 last questions, Tina. The first one is, if you have absolutely no information at all about anyone, what are like 3 supplements that you might suggest women of our age should need regardless? Are there any regardless that you tend to recommend?
I love my creatine. Obviously, muscle is really important, and now there's all these, brain memory cognition benefits of creatine. So I always recommend that. And I feel like you've talked about creatine too. It is pretty well studied. It's safe. So I like that. It's pretty affordable. It's not like super expensive. So love a good creatine. I do like electrolytes. Like, I just think it's one of those things that like you can kind of like cover your bases. And there's like a bazillion out there. The Body Bio one is good. Element. I think it's just like an easy way to just like, add to your water. So that's usually one. And then a lot of times I'm recommending magnesium, just because it is another one of those that like I just feel like we're deficient in. I would recommend a potassium supplement, but I think you get more bang for your buck through food, just because you would need to take so many supplements. And I'm like, you might as well just eat. It's so much tastier and easier to get them. And I think your body actually receives the potassium from food probably better, because a lot of times the potassium supplements just aren't the highest quality of potassium. I don't know. There's all these like rules and regulations around potassium supplements. I've gone down so many rabbit holes.
No, totally. And, I like, because too much potassium, you get like heart arrhythmias or something like that. And that's why it's so, yeah. But for the most part, if someone had low potassium, like, are you confident they could correct that with food?
Yeah, I think so. I think it will take a little bit of time, and then that stress piece is really important. Oh, and GI issues too.
Oh,
Because,
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And if you have more loose stool, I guess, you're going to be losing a lot more potassium too. So we've definitely had clients that, they've tested their HTMA. Sometimes we'll see not detected on their test as far as potassium goes. And then, we're encouraging them to consume more, and like they'll barely see that potassium move, but it's not just the food. It is also the stress and the GI stuff. So again, it depends, but yeah, I think you could, if you were consistent with it. I've definitely seen mine improve over the years, because mine was a 1 when I first.
Wow. And what would you expect it to see? Or what would optimal look like?
I'm not sure. I'd have to like look it up, but it's definitely higher than
But one
1.
is low. One is very low.
One is very low. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice one, Tina. So I know you have a podcast. Obviously, I think you've just started running your Fit and Fueled for the next 6 months. Is that right?
Yep. We're on week 2. So we just started. Yeah.
Amazing. But I know you have other ways that people can work with you. Can you just let people know the different ways which they can connect with you?
Yep. So Fit and Fueled is my group coaching program, and we enroll for that twice a year. So the next group will be in September. And then we do have a one-on-one functional testing program called Metabolism Accelerator. So if you're somebody that really thrives with that one-on-one attention, working with a coach or a practitioner one-on-one, that program could be really helpful for you. It's just more hands-on, as far as like the one-on-one attention and results and all that. And then we always have the HTMA. It's the only test that we run by itself, just because I do think it's so valuable, and the results are, I don't know, it's kind of like the low hanging fruit, at least for me, because as I was saying, you have to eat, you really probably need to manage your stress. And I feel like if you can do those two things, you're going to be in a much better place as far as your health goes. So we always let people run that when they want. And people do multiple tests too. So it's such a cool test.
Nice one. And is it carrotsandcake.com?
Yep. So carrots, the letter N, and then cake. And I'm carrots and cake everywhere. Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel.
Yes. And what about your podcast? Is it called Fit and Fueled?
Yeah, we changed the name. Yeah, it was Carrots and Cake podcast for a while, but just to help people find us a little bit easier, it's Fit and Fueled now, and that's kind of like my motto for life.
No, I love it. Yeah, it's so good. And you interview some interesting people, particularly about things that are super on, if I say on trend, what I mean is like, I know that you've discussed peptides with experts, you have client stories, which I always find super inspiring, and then also just other practitioners. And I think the more that people, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to chat to you, Tina, because you have a different approach to a lot of other people that I sort of connect with. And it's clearly, you're helping the people you work with. So the more that people know of the different options, just, the better outcomes you can get.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with my own journey through this health system and everything, there were so many times I felt stuck and I felt like nobody was listening, or I just didn't know how to get help. And like, that's the worst feeling, is when you don't feel your best and like you just don't know what your next step is. So I think that's why I do what I do. But just what you were saying, there's so many people that want to help others get healthy, and there's not one right way. So I think it is nice to hear from different people and get different perspectives, because we're all so different and who knows what's going to work. So just thank you for saying that, because the podcast has been really fun to do. I feel like I've learned so much from so many different people.
Same. Oh my God, I know so much more now about what you do. Of course I knew what you do, but I just with regards to just the patterns and the other functional tests and stuff, I just found it super valuable. So thank you so much, Tina.
Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed chatting to Tina. She's such a wealth of information, and she really provides a ton of free resources that can help you get some quick wins in your health journey. So I just really love that. Next week on the podcast, I speak to Brandon De Cruz about spot reduction, body fat spot reduction, and whether or not it's a myth. Spoiler, it's not, and he tells us how to do it. That is next week. Until then, you can find me over on Threads, X, and Instagram at Mikki Williden, Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, or head to my website, mikiwilliden.com, book a one-on-one call with me. All right, guys, you have the best week. See you later.